Okay, well, sorry we're a few minutes late, but just in time. Sorry we're a few minutes late, but hey, this is Malaysia, right? And I've lived here for 26 years, so I've probably been here longer than most of you lot. They're all students, so that I take the mickey out of them. What's a masterclass? I'm not just going to stand here and talk at you. You guys are going to do the thinking this morning, okay? It's a masterclass, right? I don't know what a masterclass is. I was thinking it's either a masterclass or it's a workshop, so we could call it a masterwork or master shop. Anyway, whatever works. So my name's Julian. I'm from an organization called Reef Malaysia, and we do marine conservation. Why am I here? Why is the white guy standing at the front? Why isn't one of you local people here? Simply, it's an accident of history. I just got involved and stayed involved. I used to live on Tioman Island, running a dive center, living the life, being a beach bum. And then I got involved with this 18 years ago, and I'm still doing it. This is an organization that does 4 principal things. And it's all to do with improving the conservation status or the management or protection of marine resources. Started off as coral reefs, obviously, Reef Check Malaysia. We now work more widely on mangroves and seagrasses as well, because they're ecologically linked ecosystems. I should be asking you these questions. Why do we work on all 3 ecosystems? Environmental science students from Nottingham, right? Anyway, so we try and work with different types of stakeholders to try and improve the status of these resources. Imagine an island. Who's been to one of the islands? Anybody been to one of the islands? Which one? A lot. I'm a diver. Okay. Which is your favorite diving island? Bali. No. Sea Amil. Ooh, aren't we fancy? Sea Amil out in Escom where nobody's allowed to go. That one. Ooh, okay. I've been there. Did you see the mobula rays? It's pretty cool, right? So what could possibly go wrong at Sea Amil? God, this is why. Sea Amil's a tiny little island way to the east of Sempurna town in the south of Sabah. Very, very small island. There's a very small population there of local Sea Amil and Denawan next door to each other. Local community living on the island. One of the islands is local community. The other island is an army base, because this is about as far east as you can get before you hit the Philippines, right? You take a boat ride for about 5 minutes, you're in Philippines waters. So it's very remote. It's a very small island. It's got a very small community. What could go wrong? Why are we concerned about Sea Amil? Mainly blast fishing, yeah. So the clever fellas in Sempurna use the cheap, quick, easy way to catch fish. Throw a bomb in the water, the fish all float to the surface, and you gather them all up, and it's quick and easy. Of course, it destroys the ecosystem underneath, and once the reef is destroyed by repeated bombing, it takes 1,000 years to come back. All right, so that's the sort of thing that can go wrong. You were going to say Tioman, I think? Were you going to say Tioman? Whatever. Yeah. Tioman, okay. What could go wrong on Tioman? You've been there? So Tioman's mainly tourism. And there's 250,000 visitors every year. And there are an increasing number of resorts. So when I lived on the island, there were about 7-8 dive centers. Now there are 40. All right. And when I lived on the island, there were about 55, 60 resorts. Now there's 110. All right. So all of this development is going to have various impacts: chopping down trees, siltation in the water, extra sewage treatment, and so on, or extra sewage load. So those are the sorts of things that can go wrong. And why is this important? Because the other things we do, management is helping local communities get involved in management. We do a bit of science on reef restoration and how all that works. We work with the communities, with government, with different stakeholders, state level as well, to try and encourage people to listen about reefs and understand that they're important. But our main program there, the first one, is Eco Action. That's about coral reef surveys. That's where we get our data from. So we go to 300 sites around the country every year. I'll show you a picture of what it looks like in a minute. But this is why I'm going on about this, because for a tourist, right, who obviously has no understanding of conservation or environmental issues, just kidding. Reefs are pretty, okay? Oh, look at the reefs, look at the clownfish, look at the... Yeah, great. It's nice, but there's a lot more to it than that. So coral reefs and mangroves and seagrass meadows, seagrass beds, seagrasses, whatever. These three things together is what we mean when we talk about marine biodiversity, okay? Now, I'm going to I've got a couple of interesting slides which talk about biodiversity in a minute, but let's pretend for a minute that biodiversity is important, okay? Just pretend. And why is it important? Because it creates habitats for lots of fishes. Now, I've just done a study for the all-party parliamentary group of Malaysia on the Sustainable Development Goals. All right, that's a bunch of MPs got together, interested in the SDGs, want to find out how to make them work better in their constituencies. So I looked at some fisheries issues, and they did visits to nearly 100 MPs' constituencies to discuss what the problems are, what the challenges are that communities are facing. And if you're talking about a coastal community, many of them are fishermen. All right, and what's going on in the fishing community? Well, places like, let's pick an example, Pulakatam, right, on the west coast, right? We all know where it is. It's got lots and lots of mangroves, okay? There are probably some coral reefs, but the water's so dirty I wouldn't really want to go and have a look. And there's a few, there are some seagrasses in the area as well. So they've got all three of these ecosystems. Okay. I was at a meeting of the APPGM a few weeks ago, and the MP for, I think it's Kapar, which covers Pulakatam and the area to the north, all right? So imagine the west coast, Pulakatam, going up towards Sikinchang, all right? That area there, they love their local belacan, right? They make the belacan with the chilies and the prawns and all of that, right? And the MP was saying that her constituents are now complaining they have to go to Sikinchang to get prawns. I mean, Sikinchang, it's like a foreign country, so far away. The prawns are different, right? Because it's a different seawater there, different pollutants, okay? So our belacan's no longer the same. It's changed because we've got no local prawns. Why are there no prawns locally? Oh, land reclamation, right? So big land reclamation projects destroyed the nurseries and the habitats where they get their prawns from, okay? Now, I just use that as a little example. Maybe it's not a great example, but it's a good example. It's a real-life example of what happens when we destroy our marine ecosystems, the habitats that generate fish, okay? Because this is where little fish grow, right? And little lobsters and little shrimps and all sorts of stuff. They will grow and mature in the mangroves and the seagrass beds, and then they'll move out to maybe the coral reef. They'll move out into deeper water where they become prey for other fish, okay? So there's a whole system of ecological connections here, starting right up on the shoreline that goes all the way into the deep water tuna fisheries. So if we damage these ecosystems that generate these small fish, it's not just these things that are in trouble, right? It's the deep water tuna fishery that's in trouble because they're all connected. These little fishes here move out to the seagrass meads and then go from there to coral reefs. From there they go into the deeper water, they go into the pelagic waters where the big tunas eat them. So if you kill this, you kill the tunas. What do we all love? Tuna. Dolphin-friendly tuna. But still, you don't know what dolphin-friendly tuna is. Everyone's like, dolphin-friendly? Nobody? Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. You're so young. Right, so that's what we do. And there is an economic reason for this, which is when you're talking to business, we're in Bank Negara, right? So they're all about money here, right? So why should we care? Because small-scale fishers of the sort I've described generate about 1% of our GDP and employ over 100,000 people. If we continue to destroy the mangroves off the east coast of Malaysia, right, which is where a lot of small-scale fishermen are, you're going to destroy about 75,000 jobs. What are they going to do? They're going to move to the cities where all the jobs are, which means you guys have to compete with all of those people from outside of town for accommodation, for transport. You think the traffic's bad now? Add another 75,000 small fishermen plus 4 members of family. So that's about, do the maths, June, 300,000 people extra on the roads every day competing for space, shopping, apartments, transportation, food, everything. So if nothing else, even if you don't think reefs are pretty things, you have a vested interest in keeping these people away. So let's look after the mangroves. Malaysia is the, I think, second largest consumer of fish per capita, right? 57 kilos a year. Where does the fish come from? From the mangroves and the seagrasses and the coral reefs, right? Think about the guys in Kapar They can't make their balachan anymore. Small example. On the further north on the west coast in Lumut, the Ikan industry almost collapsed, right? In Langkawi, it did collapse, and it's now recovered because they established protected areas. But these are, I mean, who cares, right? Who cares about coral reefs and mangroves in Lumut? Nobody here, obviously. Oh, okay, thank you, Steve. One person out of 20, so let's say 5% of the let's not go down that rabbit hole. But there are real economic consequences. Biological, yes, but more importantly, ecological. On the east coast, islands like Tium and Redang, we estimate there's about 500,000 visitors a year. It's probably more than that, but that's the best data we've got. And we reckon that that's worth about 1 billion ringgit a year in revenues, okay, from diving, from snorkeling, accommodation, transport, food, the rest of it, okay? And it supports about 10,000 local jobs. Now, when we destroy the coral reefs on the island and no tourists want to go there, where are those 10,000 people going to go? They're going to come to KL, they're going to compete with you guys. I'm trying to make a connection between what happens in a remote place. Everybody's like, oh, it's Tim and it doesn't affect me. Siam, it's so far away, it doesn't affect me. Yeah, it does, right? Not just in that financial way, but also ecologically, because once the habitats are gone, they're gone. So part of the context here, I love this. So a 2022 report by MGTC looked at guidelines for service sector, right? And particularly SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises in the service sector. I mean, the service sector, what impact does I want an answer to this. What impact does the service sector have on biodiversity? Little restaurant, little shop, maybe a little garage, right? All these little services, computer design company, right? What impact do they have on biodiversity, really? Why should they care? You know, yes, Petronas has an impact on biodiversity. Yes, Sime Darby has an impact on biodiversity. The big corporates that are into plantations and manufacturing, all of that, clearly you can see that they have an impact on biodiversity. What about the thousands of little SMEs that have an impact on biodiversity? What is that impact? Because I honestly don't know. All right, I struggle when I'm talking to people from small businesses. They're like, yeah, we get it, we understand, but why does it affect us? Why do I care? I employ, okay, Reef Malaysia employs 25 people, right? We're an SME. Okay, we're a bit different because we're a conservation SME, but we're an SME. What's our impact on biodiversity? Come on, environmentalist people. Okay, I'll come back to it, right? You've got to answer me in a little while. So the report mapped out the impact of SMEs on biodiversity. And it said these guys are having an impact on SDGs. They're having an impact on SDG 6, 7, 11, 12, 13, and 15. Okay? Now, if you know your SDGs, you will know that SDG 14 is about life below water. Where is it? It's not on the map. So the government is advising SMEs about their impact on biodiversity, but only terrestrial. Right? Never mind marine. Everybody's like, oh, marine, who cares, right? Invisible ecosystems. We call coral reefs the invisible ecosystems because nobody's ever seen them. Have you dived on coral reefs, snorkeled on coral reefs? Anybody? Who's seen a coral reef? Okay, so we have an unusually high proportion in the audience this morning that has, but generally the answer is, oh, not me. Not many people have. So that's my little moan. You'll hear Ruben next door. He's all about forests or carbon, all of that sort of stuff. Carbon, who cares? Okay, what's going wrong? There are two types of things happening to reefs. One is local stuff. One is non-local stuff. You've got stupid tourists standing on reefs. That's a real picture. Okay, that really does happen. Land development, somebody mentioned earlier on, that's causing siltation to be released into the water. The siltation sits down on the corals, and the corals die off because they're photosynthetic. You've got, like Steve said, you've got people doing fish bombing. That's also a real picture. I have a little video showing some people in Pulau Selakan off of Semporna actually going to interdict to catch some people doing fish bombing in their area, right? So it's a real problem. It's happening every day. These things we can do something about, right? If you're a tourist on Tioman, right, and you've got a good snorkeling guide, that snorkeling guide's going to say, please don't stand on our reefs, okay? But if you've got a bad snorkeling guide on an island where they don't care, that's not going to happen, right? But we can do something about this. We can do something about this. The siltation from resorts, you manage where you develop your resorts, You manage how you develop your resorts. You make sure you've got silt curtains in place so you can manage a construction site so it minimizes impacts to the ocean. Fish bombing we can definitely do something about by ensuring that, by education awareness programs, right? So we teach local people, as we are doing, particularly in Sabah where it's a problem, about the evils of fish bombing, why it's bad for them, get them involved in other livelihoods. Why would somebody do that? I mean, apart from the fact it's a great, quick, easy way to make money, why are they doing it? Okay. Oh, yeah, slightly. It's totally illegal. Trawling depends where you are. Shallow waters, yes. There are different fishing zones. But this is like, it's ignorance, it's lack of awareness, but it's also economic, also economic imperative, right? If you go to Sempurna in Sabah, just as an example, all of the tourists come into Sempurna mainly from Tawau, all right? They get on the plane to Tawau, they get a bus along the coast, they go to Sempurna. And what do they do then? Do they stay and have a nice meal in a restaurant, stay in a nice hotel so that there's some economic benefit to the town? No, they get straight on a boat out to one of the resorts on the island. So all of the money is going to the resort operators out there, okay? None of the money is sticking in Sempurna. There's no money in Sempurna, there's no jobs. Hence, they resort to things like this. So how do we deal with this? It's a mixture of awareness and alternative livelihoods, supplementary livelihoods. You give them another job, basically, right? So they don't have to do that. So this we can do something about, and that's called resilience, ecosystem resilience. These ones at the bottom here, it's not I can't do anything about that. That's for you guys to deal with, your younger generation. We've caused the problem. Over to you. See the grey hair? I don't care. Storms, bigger storms, ocean warming, ocean acidification. These are big government-to-government things. This is what the Paris Agreement is for. This is what governments are. This is what ASEAN is negotiating at the moment. Stuff like carbon capture. So I can't do anything about that lot, but we can fix these problems. We've lost, well, you can read it, 14% of reefs. We've lost 20% of mangroves. We've lost 29% of seagrass in the last, 2-3 decades. This is still going on. Think about, I don't know how much time you guys spend in coastal areas, but everywhere I go in Malaysia, and like I said, I've been here for 26 years, everywhere you go, you can see disturbances around the coastline, right? You go to Malacca, you can see the land reclamation. You go to the East Coast, you can see the resorts being developed there. You go to the islands. Perhentian Island, anybody? Okay, the new Marriott resort. Oh my God. I first went to Perhentian in 1999, right? Early in the year. But we rocked up on Long Beach. And there's Long Beach is about 1.5 kilometers long, right? There's a resort at this end and the resort at this end. And in the middle, there's nothing. It was beautiful. Last time I was on Perhentian a few months ago, about September last year, there were a resort at this end. There was a resort at this end. And there were resorts all the way along the beach. I kid you not. I was shocked. And they're not little A-frames anymore like they used to be. They're multi-story concrete buildings. Why would you go to Perhentian today? The Marriott's beautiful. It goes all the way across the small island from one side to the other. It's nowhere near the frickin' beach. It's got a great big hill, right? It's all buggies you've got to drive around on. What are we going to do? So that's why, right? That's why. That's what my colleague Alvin likes to say. Itulah. That is a picture from June last year in the middle of what has been acknowledged as the 4th global coral bleaching event, right? First one was in 1998, and I saw the results of that in Pulau Tioman back in 98-99, when about 40% of corals died, okay? By 2010, the second event, they'd more or less recovered, so they all got wiped out again. This shows sea surface temperatures. It's from NOAA. Our good friend Donald Trump, you may have heard, is damaging the American government, and they're going to close down NOAA, so we will no longer have information on coral reefs, on sea surface temperatures, which is a huge management tool loss. But never mind, that's Donald Trump. Anyway, this shows warm water. The red bits and the purple bits are warm water. You can see throughout Southeast Asia, there is warm water. What does warm water do? Coral have photosynthetic algae living inside their tissues. When they get stressed by warm water, for example, then they throw the zooks out, right? Once they've not got the zooks, they've like, imagine my hand where the tissue is transparent and you can see the skeleton underneath, okay? That's what bleaching is. So the tissue has lost its color and the coral has lost its food. So they're now on a starvation diet. That's what bleached coral is. Now, if the stressor goes away, then the zooxanthellae, the algae, get attracted back into the coral. It gets its color back and it survives. It's got its food source back, right? And it depends how long, depends on the species of coral, depends on the temperature rise, but it can have a huge impact. So last year, we were doing surveys all around Malaysia, and up to 90% of corals were bleached, okay? Now, that doesn't mean 90% are dead. Some of them will die. We don't know yet. It takes a while to do the monitoring. We've started monitoring again this year, find out just how much has died. My colleagues were in Pulau Sibu and Pulau Tinggi in Johor on Monday and Tuesday, and about 50% of the corals have died. Okay, which is not a good thing. This is a picture of reef health in Malaysia over the last few years. How do I make that do for thing? No, not that. I want it to go play there. Wait, I know. There we go. Okay, so that's the first bleaching event in 2010. We lost a bit of coral, right? And that's early monitoring, so we didn't have that much data. After that, we have a period. Have I really? You're going to make me do this? Come on, please. Ding. 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 Huh? Uh-oh. Never mind. I'll just go through it myself. So, stop it. Stop it. Oh. She's doing it. Yes, fine. Just leave it there. It's okay. I can talk over it. So, you can see the reduction there. It doesn't reflect the numbers I gave you. Actually, in 2010, we lost about 10% of corals. All right, so not too bad. Then you have this recovery 2010 to 2012, 13 or 14, when the reefs recovered, right? Which shows that reefs are naturally healthy and resilient and they will recover after a disturbance. Then what happened? About 2014, 2015, there's this slow decline here. And we think that's because by 2014, 2015, tourism had recovered from the 2008 financial crash, right? Again, you're probably too young to remember it, but it was a big thing at the time. Right, and economies really suffered, and there was a big drop in tourism. So once that had recovered, then this reduction here, the second big reduction over the few years there, was when tourism grew and impacts grew and so on. And then we had this period from 2019, 2020, 21. What happened there? Right? COVID, which means there were no tourists, which means the reef health improved. Wow, what a shocker. And then after that, 2022, what happened? Went down again. Why? Because tourism came back. All right. Now, I'm not just blaming tourists, although they are largely to blame for what's happening to reefs. But this data is useful for managers because we can say, if we want to improve things on the islands, remember I was talking about local threats, this one, right? We can do something about that by managing tourists. You're not allowed to go to this area for 6 months. You're not allowed to go to this area for 6 months. Back in the day, farmers used to leave fields fallow. They would leave them empty for a couple of years. They're rotational farming. Maybe we need to start doing things like, now it's working. Now it's working. There you go. So there's the growth in tourism after the 2008 crash, and then there's the COVID recovery. So we've seen that. So we have valuable ecosystems. They're in decline, but it can be fixed. Okay? And imagine I'm speaking to business people here now, not students. Don't take it the wrong way. But why should we? This conference is about climate, right? It's about climate governance. What has coral reefs got to do with this? Right? What have mangroves, seagrasses got to do with this? Well, we think it's all connected, right? These things. If you're a business, are you interested in how these ecosystems are managed? Now, go back to the service industry I was talking about earlier on. Service sector. What's included in the service sector? Hotels. All right. What have we got on the islands? Hotels. Right. Diving and snorkeling businesses, tourism businesses, transportation businesses. These are all connected to the islands because without the tourists, then they've got no business. Fisheries. is connected with this. Okay, fisheries, not just the small scale fisheries I was talking about in the kampungs up and down the coastline, but you've got the deep water fleets, right? You've got the tuna fisheries, both Peninsula and East Malaysia. Those are all affected by this stuff. That's all business, right? And all of the fisheries products that you see, you get your belacan, you get your dried seafood stuff. It's all connected. It's all connected to the ecosystems. And so if you are a small business, there are several business sectors we can easily name, which are affected directly by biodiversity, but also a whole bunch of others, because it's like, how are we representing stakeholders in management, for example? Do we allow the islanders a voice in how we manage their resources? So here we go. Here's Pulau Tierman, all you little brown-skinned people. A white-skinned person comes along and says, now then, you little brown-skinned people, I'm going to tell you how you manage your island. And they're all like, who's he? Right? So you've got to involve them. Sorry, it's a thing. But why should businesses care about these questions? Why should businesses care about the ecosystems, the habitats that we all rely on? Okay, so second part. I'm going to just take a breath. Has anybody got any questions? Am I speaking too quickly? I speak quickly when I get excited. I'm excited. Sure. You have to wait.
You asked about... Yes. It is working? Yes, there we go. So you asked about SMEs and companies and why should they care. And some of you have seen me already. I'm the annoying climate fiction author. And we've been spending a lot of time...
Climate is a fiction. Climate change is a fiction. We all know this.
Yeah. It's all fake news, yeah. And we've been looking at how things develop into the future. And one of the brutal realities is that companies, whatever it is they're doing now, out 20, 25 years, the companies are either going to be a climate solution or they're going to be gone. They won't exist anymore. So the reason that they should care is that if they want to prevail as businesses, if they want to continue as businesses, pass it on to the next generation and so on, they need to be working out how they become climate solutions, whatever it is they're doing. So if you're going to be a hotel, how am I a hotel that's actually doing the right thing in the right way for the long term rather than predatorially extracting profit now? So that's the thing that they need to work out.
So that's one side of it. That's almost the moral side of it. It's not completely a moral argument, but what I'm going to talk about next is the external drivers. Okay, why should why are businesses having to look at these things other than it being a good idea, right? It being important that we protect these habitats for future food security, if nothing else, right? Because if all your fish go, what are you going to eat instead? Oh, we'll eat some chickens. Where are you going to grow the chickens? Well, who knows how to grow chickens? Fishing's easy. You chuck a hook in the water and you pull a fish out, right? How do you grow a chicken? I don't know. Take its head off. So these are the sorts of treaties and obligations that Malaysia's supposed to be, is a signatory to and is taking regard of. It all started in 1973, actually 1972, but 1973 with the first big treaty CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, which is still going on today. There's a very famous Malaysian called, what's his name, Anson Wong? Is that right? Anson Wong? Yeah, he loves this stuff. Convention on Biological Diversity was only signed in 1992, so it was only a few years ago that we started looking at biodiversity as an issue. We go on through biosafety, Nagoya Protocol, Kunming, Montreal, Global Biodiversity Framework now is our roadmap. As Recheck Malaysia, it's the one we look at because it's got a bunch of targets which are aimed at reducing biodiversity loss. Okay. Now, remember biodiversity. What is biodiversity? It's not just about pretty trees. Okay. That is biodiversity, nature. But biodiversity for us is about habitats, ecosystems, and habitats. So the biodiversity is about mangroves, for example. But the reality, the economic and ecological reality, is about the ecosystem services that habitat provides. Yes, my mate Aldry loves to walk through mangroves because he's a very strange guy. But apart from being a pretty ecosystem, they generate food, they protect coastlines, and so on and so forth. So they're very important economically as well as ecologically. Let's talk about the GBF for a little while. 23 targets covering planning and management of biodiversity, ecosystem protection, sustainable use, benefit sharing, all of these sorts of things. It's online. You can get hold of this. It's a very important treaty. There are several targets which we're particularly interested in, but for businesses, this is what's driving your interest in biodiversity. Okay, target 7 is about reducing pollution to levels that are not harmful to biodiversity, including nutrients, which equals sewage, okay, and including pesticides and other chemicals. Anybody been down to Pulau Ketam recently, the mouth of the River Klang? Would you want to, well, okay, would you want to swim there? No. We are doing some work in the south of Johor at a little village called Kampung Perigi Aceh in Tanjung Langsat. Small island, small community, and it has a very big quite a big seagrass meadow in front of it, which the locals use for fishing, for gleaning. Culturally, they use it as well. And it's slowly being degraded by erosion from shipping nearby, and it has a horrible industrial estate just nearby the kampong, which puts all of its waste into the waters, and the river comes down to the sea, and it pollutes their seagrass bed. It's got heavy metals in there, it's got pesticides. We've done the water quality testing. The water is poisonous. We've tested the seafood. The seafood is poisonous. The locals are eating it. Why? It's part of their food. It's part of their culture. It's what they do. Every couple of times a year, the blokes all get together and go and play around in the mud on the seagrass meadows. Don't know why, but they do. Right? It's part of their culture. So this is a real thing for them. So if you're a business, okay, and you're a small company out in Selangor and you're doing metal furniture manufacturing and you're painting it, you're spray painting it, right, you're dipping it in chemicals, there's all sorts of stuff going on there. But I'm just an SME, I'm not doing any harm. Really? Okay, heavy metals released into the environment, there's harm. This is why you should be aware of what's going on, because you are going to become more liable for this. All of this stuff is creating a duty, what's called a duty of care. Target 15, encourage businesses to monitor and disclose biodiversity risks. Okay, now it's going to start with the big boys, right? This is a new initiative. It's going to start with the big companies in the next 2 or 3 years. There's the national framework has just been agreed. And by 2026, 27, the biggest MNCs and GLCs in Malaysia will have to start reporting on their biodiversity risks. Now, if they had attended my seminar today, they would know what the biodiversity risks are, but still most of them actually don't know much about what the biodiversity risks are. So there's a lot of work to do on reporting systems, on data collection, and understanding what happens. And the thing is here, it's not just about the big companies, the MNCs that are in trouble. It includes their supply chains. So all of the small companies that they buy from are going to have to follow these same standards. That's what drives change. So get used to it, guys, because we are now, well, not we, but there are stricter and stricter standards on emissions by big companies and small. I like this one. There's biodiversity funding gap. The biodiversity funding required is $200 billion a year to protect biodiversity. Most of this money is coming from where? Who's got $200 billion a year spare? Not many people, eh? No, not anymore, I'm afraid. But it's got to come from somewhere, right? Now, the thing is, I'll show you in a little while that actually biodiversity can pay for itself. We'll come back to that. Okay, what else have we got? Policies. What policies are relevant locally? There's a whole bunch of them. But most important is the National Policy on Biological Diversity. All of this reflects ongoing efforts to protect biodiversity. Malaysia is, in my opinion, pretty far ahead of the pack in terms of biodiversity conservation. Right? I've been speaking to a lot of people in other countries. I have a group I work with in the region. We are the only country that I can find that is spending money on biodiversity conservation through the ecological fiscal transfers. Anybody familiar with the EFTs? Okay, it's money that's paid by the federal government to states every year for them to spend on biodiversity conservation. So, example, Terengganu State Parks Management Council gets money from the ecological fiscal transfers for managing the Kenya State Park. All right? So it's federal money given to the states for biodiversity management, EFTs, ecological fiscal transfers. And it was started off in, I think 2019, it was 60 million a year. The 2024 is 150 million a year, and I think this year it's supposed to be 200 million a year. All right, so that is money coming from the states, from the federal government to the states. We are working with Pahang State Parks Corporation on a project in the Sri Wat archipelago, just off the coast of Pahang, to look at biodiversity surveys there, and that money is coming from the EFTs. Right? I don't know anybody else that's doing that, so yay, good one, Malaysia. All right, pat yourselves on the back for that one. Anyway, sorry, I digress. So the National Policy on Biological Diversity does align with the global goals of the Global Biodiversity Framework. More importantly, Target 3 says reduce pressure on biodiversity. Okay, how do we reduce pressure on the biodiversity in our coastal areas? Pulau Ketam, Pulau Pinang, right? Redang, Mersing Islands. These are coastal areas. Anybody know about Kuala Selangor Nature Park? Anybody seen the fireflies? Okay, a few people have. So there's biodiversity. How do we protect that? Stop the tourists? No, that one's a development problem. People cutting down the mangroves to build aquaculture ponds. Okay, so fishing, there's no fish left in the sea, okay? What do we do instead? Aquaculture, sea farming, right? Fish farming. Okay, good. We can get economic benefits and so on. What happens when you make a fish pond? First thing you do is cut down the mangroves. Oops. Second thing you do is intensively feed them and use lots of pesticides and stuff to keep the fish happy. Oops. And then you sell them on to people at inflated costs. So there's a whole bunch of, yes, there's economic value in there, but what's the damage? Where's the balance? Who's doing the balance between harm to the environment and good to the economy? We're not having that conversation. So direct pressure on biodiversity is supposed to be reduced. We're supposed to safeguard key ecosystems and species. How do we manage our islands? Are we familiar with the marine parks around the islands? All the islands off the east coast, Redang, Perhentian, Tioman, Kapas, all the rest of them. 2 nautical miles from low water mark outwards is a marine protected area under the Fisheries Act 1985, right? In that area, no fishing's allowed. So it's meant to protect the reefs and the fish in that area. That is managed by the Department of Fisheries. Okay, follow me here. So marine protected area, 2 nautical miles, Department of Fisheries. Okay. The land in Malaysia under the Constitution is a state issue. Okay, so let's say, pick an example. Terengganu state government decides that on the island of Perhentian it's going to build a big new resort. Okay, let's call it the Marriott. And in doing so, what's the first thing they have to do? Cut down all the trees. Okay, now, when it rains, which it does sometimes in Malaysia, what happens to bare earth? It gets washed away by the rain. It ends up in the sea. What's in the sea? The coral reefs. The silt settles on the coral reefs, which means the zooxanthellae can no longer get sunlight, so the coral dies. Okay, so economic benefit from the resort, yes. Ecological disaster in the water also. Who benefits? Well, the rich families benefit from building the resort, and the poor local fishermen suffer the consequences. All right, so how are we managing these assets? And at the moment, because of the split between federal and state can build a resort on the island, because even though it has an impact on the water, they don't care. It's not their problem. That's DOF's job. Our job is to manage the land and make money out of it. And if that has an impact somewhere else, not our problem. So how are we managing these protected areas? It's critical for a whole range of businesses, big resort operators, small tourism operators, transportation operators, the whole thing. Big value chain in just in tourism resorts. So we're not doing very well there. Financial incentives, I've talked about the EFTs already. That's going to grow. Where does the EFT money come from? Your taxes, right? So every single person becomes engaged in biodiversity conservation, whether you like it or not, and whether you know it or not. Because the government doesn't just magic money from somewhere. It's got to come from somewhere. That comes from taxes or maybe from Petronas. But we can't rely on Petronas anymore. So very real reasons for you guys, for all businesses to be aware of what's going on. Are we spending my money correctly? If you're familiar with a news organization called Macaranga, They've just recently released a report on this where they were saying, yes, the money is going to state government. Is there anybody from government here? Okay, the money is going to state governments, but we're not exactly sure what they're spending it on. Sound familiar? Sorry. Okay, moving on. So, this section 3. This made me laugh. Just take a minute or two to read what's on these slides. Okay, what are the economic benefits of biodiversity? Biodiversity is uncontrolled growth of useless weeds and harmful insects. Sounds like my back garden. I like the last bit. Nature makes all kind of random experiments to generate unfit offshoots that crowd out the livelihood space. Biodiversity is the pile of biological garbage waiting to go extinct. Sounds like my back garden. So, biodiversity not universally popular. Another one. How much do you value biodiversity? So, fisheries management suggests that Alaskan crab fisheries should close. Does it really matter if 80% of species go extinct? Do you care? Does it affect you? If it does, what sacrifices would you be willing to make to change our economic system, right? The first thing that will go in a truly ecological world, no more beef, right? Because beef farming is intensive of land and other resources. So that's beef. Personally, I like a good steak. I know it's not everybody's thing, but you know, in fact, meat in general would go. We'd have to go to a plant-based diet. Not happy about that. And the third one, to some extent, so the question here is, we could force, for example, we could highly regulate plastics and packaging. A friend of mine works for Coca-Cola. He and I often argue about plastic packaging and how Coca-Cola can make sure more of their bottles get recovered. It's a way more complicated topic than you might think, but they are doing their best. And as I say to him, Coca-Cola as a corporation never threw away a single plastic bottle, right? You guys are responsible for that, if you think about it. Consumers are responsible for post-consumer waste. It's like, it only ends up on the floor because somebody threw it there. It's not Coca-Cola's fault. So we need to think about who we hold to blame for this as well. Would you have all of these things that we could do? This is the important thing. All of these things would have economic consequences in the form of higher prices for meat, gas, and products. We could do these things, but it would be very politically unpopular. Right? Easiest thing to do with plastic bottles, for example, a 5 ringgit deposit. Okay? So when you buy a bottle of Coke in the supermarket, it doesn't cost 1 ringgit 50 anymore. It costs 6 ringgit 50. Right? $5 of that goes into a deposit return scheme. You prepared to pay that? Oh, you get the 5 ringgit back when you take the bottle back. Right? That's the incentive. When I was young, those many years ago, I used to work in a factory, a pop factory. It made soft drinks in glass bottles in those days. Didn't have plastic. Glass bottles. When you went into the shop to buy your bottle of pop, you used to pay $1 for a deposit. You'll remember this, Steve? Yeah. Liar. And so that was an incentive. So you brought your bottle back, right? Everybody brought their bottles back. In fact, you'd save up the bottles so you get a free bottle of pop from getting all of the deposits back. Why can't we do that with plastic bottles? Right? Isn't the store, the truck goes to the 7-Eleven store, it unloads half a dozen cartons of Coca-Cola. Why doesn't it take back half a dozen cartons of bottles worth of cartons? Don't go there. Right. So, but it is difficult, right? The weight, the volume, the energy cost per unit is high for plastic. But they're trying, right? But what's the economic price that we're prepared to pay? Are we prepared to pay a ringgit for a deposit, 2 ringgit for a deposit, 3 ringgit, 5 ringgit? What are we prepared to pay? And what about, never mind just Coca-Cola, what about everything else you buy that has plastic packaging? The supermarket I use now, most of their stuff isn't packed in bags. So you go along, you get a cucumber, a couple of capsicums, some onions, and I have a little cloth bag I use to put that in, right? Other people are still going along, right? A plastic bag, there's a capsicum. Plastic bag, there's an onion. Plastic bag, so we're still using too much plastic without even thinking about it. I don't know how we deal with that. I honestly don't. Okay, so why are we not investing more in biodiversity? Just that example in the supermarket, right? That's a little investment in understanding and being aware of the impacts of plastic. We did a trip down to the interceptors on the River Clang recently. Anybody familiar with the interceptors? Anybody seen them? Yeah? Ships moored, well, ship-like things moored in the middle of the river, and with a boom system, and all of the floating trash gets directed to the boat, and it gets packed away and then sent off for landfill. Great idea. Coldplay sponsors one of them. There are two. Okay? And it's a great idea, but there's so much trash floating down the river that it can't keep up. Right? It fills up in a very short space of time, and it takes longer to disconnect it, drive it to the main, to the side of the river, to the landfill or to the plastic processing plant, offload it. So all of the time it's doing this, it fills up in about half an hour, takes 2 hours to take it back to the recycling bit. So it's not actually catching stuff most of the time, but it's better than nothing. Okay, and there's plastic bottles, cartons, oil cartons, milk cartons, plastic bags floating down there. Ecological consequences that people don't think about. Let's chuck it away. Who cares? Right? It's not my problem anymore. So what are we doing? What are we investing to understand those challenges and the barriers to greater investment in biodiversity conservation? First thing is that most people are not really aware of ecological and economic value of biodiversity, quite honestly. It's a bit shocking, but it's the truth, right? Most people are like, oh yes, trees. It is trees, yes, and coral reefs and mangroves. So if people don't understand why they should pay attention, why are they going to pay attention, right? Yet, 75% of crops around the world rely on animal pollination. Okay, we're working with some people in Pulau. We're working with the bat lady. She's a little bit crazy. Pulau, which is just off the coast of Terengganu, south of Kuala Besut, has a population of fruit bats. Okay? Really, who cares? I mean, fruit bats. Well, actually, for Malaysians, it's very important because they are the primary pollinator of durian trees. All right? No more fruit bats, literally, no more durian. Now, for me, that's not a problem. When I become world president, my first act will be to chop down all durian trees because I think it's foul. But you guys like it, okay? So, seriously, real world problem right now today. Pulau attracts a few campers from the mainland, and the tourism guides like to take people up on the hill to show them the bats. Except during the day, the bats are roosting, which means they're hanging upside down in the trees doing nothing, which is pretty boring as a tourist. So the tour guides bring firecrackers and throw them up into the trees and make all the bats, right? So what do we do here? The tourism guide needs money, right? It's his job. He's got a livelihood here. He's bringing people to see the bats. Okay. The tourist wants to see bats. All right. So, perfect world. You bring the tourist, you throw the firecracker, you see the bats. Great, right? What could go wrong? Well, the numbers of bats is going down. Number of incidences, deaths is going down. The pollinator of a very popular fruit here is disappearing. Okay, real world consequences of a lack of understanding of what biodiversity is about. Okay, and it carries on. We need clean water. Where does your water come from? It comes from groundwater. How does it get in the ground? Well, it's filtered through the forests into the aquifers. If we cut down the forest, we have no more clean water, right? For both us, for agriculture, and for industry. I could go on. We rely on biodiversity and ecosystems for the whole of the way that we live, all right? Just imagine really bad episode of COVID, right? And there's no more trucks coming down from Cameron Highlands every day bringing all of the vegetables and the salads and the fruits that we eat. What are you going to do? You're going to plant some trees. You're going to start growing it yourself. Well, that'll take 1.5 years, 2 years before it's starting. So let's all move to the Cameron Highlands and start eating the stuff up there. Break down in the food supply, food chains. It's a reality. It really is. I'm not trying to scare you. It could happen. Okay. I've made a bit of a mistake here. I couldn't do the maths properly. Look, the IMF reckons that the global economy is worth about $115 trillion US. I think that's 12 zeros. It's a lot, okay? The cost of managing biodiversity is up to nearly $1 trillion. It's $967 billion a year, okay? That's the upper end. That 967 billion is just 2.2% of the global value. All right, you might wonder where these figures come from, but that calculation there is looking at all of the protected areas around the world and how much it costs to manage them, right? And it's $900 billion, okay, which is, like I said, just 2% of the value of the actual GDP generated by global output. Okay, sorry, I always confuse myself when I talk about this. But what I'm trying to say is that's the value of the economy. That's how much it would cost to protect those ecosystems. So in order to protect your bats, your pollinators, in order to protect your mangroves, your fishery resource, it would cost 2% of what it's cost, what we're actually getting out of it. It's not a lot, right? That's like a 2% tax on everything you ever buy. What's GST in Malaysia now? 0. There is no GST. There's a service tax and a sales tax. There's no GST. So all of the stuff you buy, let's just increase the price by 2% and put that money into biodiversity conservation. 2%, it's not much. Yeah, a pint of milk, a litre of milk, goes up from 7 ringgit to 7 ringgit and 5 cents. Right? It's not a lot. So how do we think about rescuing that value when it's actually worth a lot of money? Next thing, most businesses don't understand biodiversity. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Biodiversity loss impacts the stability. I mean, look, you have people in your company. You're a little 20-person company out in Selangor making metal furniture. You may not care about the impact of your operations on the environment. Maybe your staff do. Maybe some of the people that work for you are tree huggers, and they actually don't want to see this pollution going into the water, so they're going to leave. You lose a trained employee who you've invested in. They have skills, they have experience, they're worth some money. Even worse, they go to the Department of Environment and say, that guy's chucking acid into the river, okay? Now, you don't want to rely on coercion, of course, but it's a real thing. Some people do care about nature and our impacts on it. So that affects the stability of our economy and environment and society. That affects how they can do business. I'm just going to touch on this briefly. This is what Ruben's talking about next door. Carbon credits, we've all heard of carbon credits, right? The fact that forests, trees store carbon, so all of the CO2 going into the atmosphere from our careless use of natural resources can be stored there. Can also be stored in mangroves, can also be stored in seagrasses. In fact, mangroves and seagrasses store more carbon than trees do. And yet nobody appreciates that. Remember going back to what I was saying about nobody cares about marine stuff, or people just talk about trees. Never mind my coral reefs. Anyway, so there are various ways we can do this. Biodiversity stewardship certificates is an emerging thing. And that's kind of like saying, look, we have some biodiversity here, it has value, let's manage it and look after it and maintain it and conserve it in its current state for future generations. That's a great idea. Pulau Tierman, for example, it's got intact rainforest, it's got endemic species, it's got coral reefs with endangered species. That biodiversity has value, not just because lots of tourists go there, but as a natural resource, it has value. How are we going to look after it? How are we going to pay to maintain it and manage it and make sure it's sustained into the future? We're working on it. There's different ways of doing it, but there's emerging systems as well. Okay, last bit. Just talking about communities. This is, you will probably think, hang on a minute, we've just been talking about laws and policies and international treaties and financing. Who cares about local communities? So it's a little bit tangential, you might think, but actually, at the end of the day, you can't do anything without local communities. What's the forest here in Kale that they're protecting at the moment? Bukit Gasing is one, there's the Mont Kiara forest, right? There are community groups trying to hold off the government from developing these areas. And they've been quite successful. So you've got this big developer, not going to name him, big developer comes along, right, I want that piece of forest over there for my new condos. And DBKL's like, oh yeah, sure, you can have that. We're not using it, it's fine, it's a bit trees. Local community group over here saying, no, you can't do that. Structure plan says you can't do it. We're using it, it has utility, it's got biodiversity, but you can't cut down that forest just to build some more condos. Yeah, no, I'm a big businessman, I can do whatever I want because DBKL said so. No, you can't. We're a little business community here and you've got to leave it alone. So the developers spent a lot of money on studies, on architectural studies, on getting approvals, and all of a sudden these three little people in the village who said, no, you can't go away, right? Find out what your local communities want, find out who they are, what are they doing. On the islands, very proud to say this. In 2022, it was proposed that a new airport should be built on Tierman Island. All right? Not on the island, just off the island, so reclaimed. 2.5 kilometers long, 100 meters wide, reclaimed land just off the side of the island. What a great idea. We can increase the number of tourists from 250,000 to 1 million a year. That's what the EIA said. That's what the report said. We're going to quadruple the number of visitors to Tierman. Fantastic. Think of all that extra money. Marvellous. When we build the runway, there's a few coral reefs and things down there. Never mind lights only a little bit. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. And when it's busy on the island today, there's not enough rooms. We run out of water. There's no electricity. And you want to increase the number of tourists by 4 times. Yeah, think of the money. Think of the money. That's all they care about, right? Very proud to say that we had an integral part in stopping that project. Not just us, but we arranged a campaign on the island because the villagers had not been told the truth about the airport. All right? It's as simple as that. So we told them the truth. They're like, they can't do that. So the villagers revolted and said, no, we don't want the airport. And the airport didn't get built. The developer spent a lot of money on architect's plans, on environmental impact assessments, could have saved some of that money by engaging in a dialogue with the locals and understanding what their needs are and saying, how about we build this airport slightly differently, in a slightly different place? We'll extend the existing airport. There are other options. But they plowed ahead and said, no, we want to do this, and the locals said no. So, again, you're that little business in Selangor making metal furniture with acids and coatings and all that stuff going on, which you just let go out of the back door. Really? You got a local community there that might object to this at some point. Kampung Perijiake, Aceh, in Tanjung Langsat in the south of Johor, already mentioned it. Big industrial estate nearby, releasing pollution into the water, affects their seagrass meadows. They don't like it. Sungai, what's that? Slim River? What was the river that got polluted recently? Sim River? Anyway, there was a river, another one, an industrial company dumping trash into the water, closed down the waterway for several days, affected people's... A lot of problems happening. There are local communities who are starting to understand that they have a voice. And if you involve the local communities from the beginning, you get better compliance. That's the main thing. If you go to Pulau Tierman, where the locals are not involved in managing the marine park, or Pulau Redang, or Pulau Perhentian, or the Messing Islands, whatever, locals not involved, they're like, oh, we don't care, they didn't ask us any questions, so we're still going to fish in the marine park. And the DOF doesn't have enough resources to stop that happening, so they carry on fishing. We have data from the last 18 years that shows that in those marine parks, the fish populations are not increasing. The fish abundance is not increasing, which it should be in a place where there's no fishing going on. Why is the fish population not increasing? People are still fishing, right? If you involve the locals, then you get better compliance and you start to see better conservation outcomes. And I used that phrase right at the beginning. It's all about conservation outcomes. Can we protect these ecosystems? Can we conserve them so that they continue to generate the ecosystem services, the benefits that we all rely on? Food, water supply, coastal protection, all of that sort of stuff. So there's not much experience in hands-on community consultations in Malaysia. We're working with a few islanders now, a few island groups. We call them Community Marine Conservation Groups. Yeah. So in Tierman, the Tierman Marine Conservation Group now has 85 members, all local islanders. So back in the day when I started working with Reach, I would go along to these little islands over here. Here we go, you brown people. I've just done some surveys of your coral reefs, and they're not in very good condition. And they're all like, who's the white guy coming and telling us how to do stuff, right? And I had that real experience. The worst one was in Pulau Mabel. But anyway, now on Tierman, the local islanders are doing their own surveys. All right, so it's not about me coming along. It's not about another Malaysian coming along. They themselves are doing the surveys. Their peers are doing the surveys. They can talk to their brothers, their sisters, their fathers, their uncles and aunts, right? It's local people doing it. It's a very strong message. It's not outsiders anymore. It's locals saying, we have some problems, okay? This is removing a ghost net. This is a net that a fishing trawler has abandoned. It gets caught on the coral reefs, and it's called the ghost fishing because it carries on fishing. You get turtles trapped in there. You get sharks trapped in there. All sorts of fish gets trapped in there. So when we hear about these, and it's every couple of weeks, just on Tierman, then the guys go along and they get in their dive gear and they dive down, pair of scissors, literally, pair of scissors, clipping around and releasing it from the reef. In Redang, I love this. That is a beach which used to be completely unoccupied until the snorkeling boats from the mainland discovered it. Now there are as many as 50 boats a day coming and visiting this small beach, and they are bringing between 15 and 20 people per boat. Do the maths, it's 1,000, is it 1,000? Anyway, it's a lot of people, right? None of these people is paying the marine park fee, right? You go to the islands, you're supposed to pay 5 ringgit, foreigners pay 30. But none of them are paying for it. These boatmen are from the mainland. They don't understand coral reefs. They don't understand boat use in an area where there are coral reefs, which is why the local group that we work with had to set up this little buoyed area. That's a red line showing the area. This is near to this beach here, and this is a popular turtle foraging area, all right? And when you've got turtles, if you understand it, you go slow in a boat, otherwise you hit the turtle and kill it, all right? The locals know this, and they know that's a turtle foraging area, so they're good with it. All of these guys from the mainland, no idea. So the number of turtle strikes, while they're bringing their customers from here to here, number of turtle strikes is going up, number of dead turtles is going up, and it's mainly because of all these guys from the mainland who are not doing anything. Who are not used to driving a boat in an area like this, right? So what happens? CNCG, the RMCG, the Red Ang Marine Conservation Group, set up this areas. There are now buoy lines keeping out the tourists. They do education programs with all the boatmen on the beach here, and the number of turtle strikes is going down again. All right. So getting local people involved has real conservation outcomes. Department of Fisheries was not able to do anything about this. I'm being polite. This is in Selatan, so this is just off of Semporna. I'm not going to bother with the video. Let's give it a go. See if we can. So this is some people that we've been working with for a while. There we go. And this guy is a fish bomber, right? And this is his supply assistance, right? So these two guys are fish bombing. These guys are from Selatan Island, and they're part of a community group that we set up there, Selatan Marine Conservation Group. We gave them a drone, so that was their drone footage we saw. And they are going along and encouraging, nicely and politely, asking these guys to please somewhere else. Okay? So they're protecting their own area now. This island, Selatan Island, is not in a protected area. Okay, there's no MPA around, there's no enforcement of activities at all. So it's up to them themselves to fix this problem. And that's what we're helping them to do. So we're training them up to do this. Then we give them the drone. We pay the petrol costs. We pay them a small salary. So we're funding it, but they're doing all the work. And now they have been recognized as honorary Ranger Kahormat Taman. So they are recognized as honorary wardens by Sabah Parks. Even though it's not a Sabah Parks protected area, Sabah Parks is recognizing them as an honest legal group that is allowed to do this stuff. All right, so that's a huge success story. Oh no, we've seen that already. In Mantanani, this is what it used to look like. This is what it now looks like when you throw fish bombs on it for a few years. It's a bit of a false comparison. I never saw that reef and then saw that, but I have seen this and I have seen this. So this is what really happens. This has lots of value for tourism, for fisheries, and this has got no value at all. So this is the challenge. So we put in some fish bomb detectors. We were detecting about 2,400 blasts per year, and that's now gone down to 24 per year. And simply because they knew we were there, the police got involved a little bit. We were talking to the villagers, and most importantly, we improved the economy. So they don't need to go fish bombing anymore because they now all work in the homestays that we've set up on the island. Right? So now the homestays are earning between them, I think last year was about $85,000, which among 6 homestays on the island is a lot of money. That has replaced the revenue from fishing. They don't need to fish bomb anymore because we've given them an alternative source of revenue. Incomes on the islands are very small. If you think $85,000 times 4 and a bit is a lot of money for 6 families on Mantanani. It's not much in KL, I know, but it's a lot on the islands. So engaging with the locals helps to reduce local threats and build resilience. It improves compliance and you get better stewardship and you strengthen management and you have better conservation outcomes. That's why we involve the local people. How? capacity building, training, awareness sessions, consultation sessions, get them involved in restoration. They love it. The kids on the island, the young adults on the islands love it. You say, okay, we want you to come to a meeting with the Department of Fisheries for us and talk about these problems. No, we don't want to do that. You want to come diving and take out a ghost? Yeah, I've got it. Right? So they love doing the sexy stuff, going in the water. We have yet to train them up to do the difficult stuff, which is talking to the government, but we're working on it. But we now support CMCGs in 7 locations. So Prentian, Redang, 7. Redang, Tierman, Mersing, and then 4 islands off of St. Paulinus. So we're funding them. Budget's about 200,000 ringgit a year for patrolling, for petrol, for dive equipment, and all of that. And we are looking to expand that and cover more coastal areas and more islands as we move on. So, in summary, why should businesses care about biodiversity? Why should you guys care about biodiversity? It's a moral question, I think, as Steve was kind of hinting at. But if you don't like the morals, look at the money, right? It has value. Biodiversity has intrinsic value in the ecosystem services it delivers to us that we need. It needs protecting. It can pay for itself. You know, the amount of money that we get from biodiversity services, like pollination and so on, we can put a value on that, we can monetize that, and then start to use the money for conservation. The consequences of not doing that, I really don't want to think about it. I think the COVID is an example. It's a great example of the way that ecosystems across the board, not just coral reefs, ecosystems improved, and then when the tourism came back, it went down again. When economic activity started again, it went down again. Remember the early days of COVID? You wake up and I look out of my window on my balcony in my apartment. There's no cars. Silent. What's that noise? Birds. I can hear the birds again. So it has, okay, so that's a spiritual value of biodiversity. Maybe you soulless city people don't feel it, but I feel it. So there's one value, but think about where your food comes from. Think about the impact that we're having from all of our activities. Next steps. So we've got these very important ecosystems which are giving lots of value. There are treaties and policies in place to try and encourage and nudge companies and societies to move in the right direction to look after those. There isn't enough money on the table to look after them properly yet, but we're working on that. And you need to get communities involved in what to do. So how do you do it? Where do you start off? That little company in Selangor making metal furniture using acids and all sorts of other nasty stuff, you've got to have a look at what you're doing. Task force on nature-related financial disclosures is coming into force soon. We've got the national the reporting framework is coming soon. These are all creating this duty of care. It's no longer good enough to say, oh, we don't have an impact on biodiversity. Yeah, you do. If you think you're not, you're kidding yourself, right? Everybody is. You need to start looking at it as a business, and you need to start thinking about what we can do as a business or as a society to reduce our impact on biodiversity. That's it. I have to show you this apparently, so feedback. That's it. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Oh, sorry, my arm's dead. Right, microphone.
You said that Reef Check is a social enterprise?
Sort of.
What is your business model?
Ooh. We are so Malaysia, there's no such thing as an NGO in Malaysia. You can't register as a non-governmental organization or a non-profit organization. So legally, we are registered as a company limited by guarantee, which means we have no shareholders. Therefore, I cannot distribute profits to anybody. Therefore, we're non-profit. Do we generate a surplus? Yes, we do. But it's not called a profit. It's semantics, I know, but that's what we are. Our business model is to run like a business, but not for profitable purposes. So we take money from large corporations, from foundations, from governments internationally, and if I want them to give me money, I have to be able to show transparency, accountability, and impact. And so we operate as a business like that. So our admin, our accounting is all run along commercial lines. We have audited accounts. We're just finalising 2024 accounts. We have a board of trustees. We have quarterly meetings of the trustees. All of our information is online, so we're transparent. And we report back to all our funders on a 3-monthly or 6-monthly basis. So we're very transparent and accountable. You can ask me any question about the business you want, and I'll answer it. That's just the way that we work. Not quite sure why you asked the question. Ha! Throw it back at you.
Just trying to see if conservation efforts can be a business and not a philanthropy.
Okay, right, understand. No, it can't be a business because nobody cares. So it has to be philanthropic. But where it's changing is that the EFTs are a government initiative to say we recognise the value of biodiversity, we recognise it has economic value, we are part of the problem, therefore we will contribute towards solving it. Okay, so that becomes more of a business proposition. If you can leverage money from carbon credits, from biodiversity stewardship, that is saying this biodiversity, you're a manufacturing company, you rely on pollination services, you rely on clean water, you rely on fisheries. These are all ecosystem services. If you want to continue enjoying that, sorry guys, you've got to pay. Right, because we're damaging them. So it's making so the business case can be made. We are not doing it effectively now, but we are trying to do better at that. We're a bunch of amateurs. Okay, we just love coral reefs, but we're trying to get slightly more professional. And we are now actively looking into the opportunities that biodiversity stewardship funding mechanisms can generate. And that is, like I said, it's simply saying, you want to visit Tierman? Sure, you can come and visit Tierman. You and a million other people. And while you're there, you're going to do a lot of damage. So you know what? You've got to pay to go there, right? You've got to pay, and that's payment for ecosystem services. Take that money and use that for management. So you can, it's about monetizing biodiversity. Nobody's worked out how to do it yet, but we're working on it. But yeah, you're right. It is, at the moment, it's, I think us and most NGOs are supported by philanthropic funding. I'd like to change that, but it's not up to me. Steve. Did you hold your hand up?
Sorry, no. As you were saying that, everybody these days has got a phone. So you could say, on Tierman, your phone arrives and Digi extracts 10 ringgit a day from you for ecosystem services. But just off the top of my head, maybe that's nonsense, but we are all geo-tracked now, so we can be, we can pay by location.
Don't scare the kids. Geo-tracked. They have, yeah. There's lots of ways you can do it. I mean, you can put it into hotel rooms. When I go to KK hotels, I think it's supposed to be national. It's a 10 ringgit a night tourism charge, right? So I'm paying the 10 ringgit. I don't know if the hotel's passing it on to the government, but I'm paying the 10 ringgit. There's lots of ways you could do it. But the point, the critical thing is to get people to understand it's necessary. At the moment, people go to the islands. They probably don't even know why. In some of the islands, you go to the jetty in some locations, and they'll say, oh, you have to pay 5 ringgit tax over there. It's not a tax. Well, I mean, it is a tax, but it's a conservation charge. And we're not taking that opportunity to explain to people why we're charging them. It is simply it's an ecosystem services charge, yeah.
So the last year, the state government of Sabah, they are okay. So this is sort of a dilemma question, okay? So
You're Sabahan, right?
Yeah, correct. I used to work with MRF. Okay. So last year, the state government of Sabah passed this law approving the OTEC project, the Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion Project, right? So they are planning to build a plant. I think in Tawau, they are trying to figure Tawau or Gaya. So this project will provide green energy, green hydrogen, and water, H2O. And Sabah, we know Sabah we need the energy, and the world needs the green hydrogen for the green transition, energy transition. But how do you reckon we navigate this dilemma between, saving the biodiversity and building this project? Because we need it, right? So what's your opinion on it? And I think the value, personally, I think the value that the project will bring is greater than the value of what the what the ecosystem can offer. I mean, yeah. So how do you think we should navigate? Yeah.
So I think that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about this morning. It's a perfect example. It's a real life example. For me, now, I know I'm going to get, some people are going to criticize me for this. I'm a nature lover, but I'm a realist. Okay, I have a car. I like red meat. I like a bottle of wine. Okay, all of these have huge economic impacts. In order, in return for satisfying myself of these pleasures, I do as much as I can to reduce my environmental impact. Okay, I won't bore you with the details, but my wife and I do quite a lot. But it's a trade-off, right? Everything in life is a trade-off. So, where are you going to build a plant? What is there now? What are the ecosystem services that creates at the moment? And what is the value of those ecosystem services? All right, that's the minus. On this side, what's it going to cost to build it? What is the economic benefits from this? And if this outweighs this, go ahead, right? Even better, let's make sure that in damaging this to achieve this, that we replace this somewhere, or you offset somewhere. Now, we don't like offsets for biodiversity because you can't offset like you can with trees, right? If you cut down some trees on Pulau Perhentian to build a resort, right, we've lost those trees. Well, we'll just go to some other place and grow some trees there. It's not, that's carbon. It can be removed from one place to another, right? But the biodiversity of those two places is different. So we don't like biodiversity offsets. But if you're going to say, it's like the airport in Tierman, right? Yes, build an airport here, but please do it in such a way that you minimize the damage when you do it, you recognize the value that you're destroying, and you do your best to replace it somehow, somewhere, that you are now saying, done that, replaced it over here, all good economically. So this is why I'll be criticized, because I'm supporting a project that will destroy some biodiversity, and here I am saying we should protect our biodiversity, right? But guys, let's not do it blindly. We're not idiots here, right? Work it out. Say we need that energy, we need those products from that development. Okay, what's it going to cost us? Not just in financial terms, which is the way we always used to make decisions. Any company has an investment choice. It can do this or it can do this. How does it decide which one of those to do? Right? The boss goes, that one, no. They look at the economics of it. They add up the cost. They look at the long-term economic benefits. Why can't we do the same with green investments like this? Yes, it will damage some biodiversity. Okay, we're damaging the biodiversity anyway. At least we're thinking about this one now and thinking about how we're doing the damage and what the benefits are. So I'm a supporter of it as far as it goes. I'd like to be more confident the technology was proven. But that's a different argument. But the basic argument of should we do this because it damages biodiversity, the answer is not always no. Right? Build an airport in Tierman, yeah, we don't want to do that. It's stupid for many, many reasons. But this one is an example which could have much bigger benefits than the downside. I think what we need to learn is to get better at the biodiversity the impact assessment, and how do we fix that? What do we do to replace that? Again, I don't want to talk about offsetting, but at least we can be aware of what we're doing and replace it somewhere, somehow. Sabahans rule for themselves, separate country. Anybody else? Because we're towards the end of our time. Or I could stand here and talk all day.
So maybe just one, in terms of, reflecting on your slides and everything, right? We have been having all these regulations, policies since like end of 70s, 80s, throughout 80s and stuff.
Showing your age.
One thing, I mean, two things that I would like to bring to your attention is the role of the government in terms of solving this. Because in the end of the day, it is the country, right? So they have to fix it. We can do so much. We can advocate, we can build as much as awareness. If you imagine the 90s with all the Taman Laut things that they have been doing, and the separation powers between the fisheries department, Taman Laut, and everything that happened in the last decade or so. I mean, and that's one thing. What's actually the government is doing, they have been doing a lot of things, but I don't think anything that is working right now. Some of it, I'm willing to say that because a few things, because I'm willing to say that. And the second thing is enforcement. We are really behind enforcement, especially when we talk about unregulated fishings and stuff like that. So what's your view?
You work for the DOF?
No.
Okay, just checking. Okay. Wow, that's a really complicated question. Yes, we're getting things wrong. The way that the marine parks were established is a good example, right? The Fisheries Act 1985, the marine parks were gazetted actually in 1994, so they're just over 30 years old now. It's older than most of you lot. And we have data for the last 17 years, as I said earlier, 18 years, fish populations are not increasing. Something's going wrong. We're not doing it well. I think this goes back to, a lot of this goes back to the Constitution that says some things are for the federal government to look after and some things are for the state government to look after, and land is one of them, right? And I think, but more importantly, there's a lack of communication between those two, right? So as I gave the example earlier on, the water around the, let's go over to Tierman over here. The water around the island is managed by the Department of Fisheries. The land is managed by state government. So as the example of Prentian, the state government come along and say, cut down all of those trees and build this big resort. Yeah, but that'll have an impact on the marine park. We don't care. That's not our problem. That's DOF's problem. So we've got this silo thinking, right? Everybody's doing their own thing. Nobody's communicating. We've just been starting to talk to Terengganu, Pahang and Johor about the idea of what we call a protected area management body, right? And we look at Tierman or we look at Redang or Prentian and say, okay, Perhilitan, you get a seat at the table because there's a wildlife reserve. Department of Fisheries, you get a seat because you're looking after the marine park. You're the Ketua Kampung, you get a seat. Businesses, you get a seat. You know, whoever else, who's got an interest in what happens on this island? And instead of you doing your thing and you doing your thing and you doing your thing, everybody doing their own thing, we're trying to say sit around the table and talk about some of these issues. So my point is, one of the biggest challenges we face is bringing everybody together to address these problems the same, right? Dr. Naeem at NRES, great guy, love him to death. Very difficult job because NRES can't do anything about biodiversity, right? Biodiversity conservation happens on the ground, so it relies on state government. But state government are like, no, you're responsible for biodiversity. It's the federal government thing. So he has to go onto the ground and persuade state governments to take biodiversity seriously, and they're not. He can't make them. Start shooting people. You didn't take biodiversity. Get rid of you. Replace you with somebody else. Well, maybe. I don't know. But I think the biggest question is, yes, we've got lots of laws and you've got lots of policy. Enforcement's for shit. Sorry. And but most importantly, we need to get people working together to look at problems more holistically. I hate the word. I feel like a hippie when I say that. But working together in a more integrated manner. I think that's the critical thing. That's my opinion. And if you come back and tell me you're a DOF guy later on, I'll strangle you.
Just to add a bit from that, surely there's a lesson learned that from the projects that we did in the past. For example, the Tun Mustafa Park in Sabah, that I would say that it's a good example to be replicated for the ones that you mentioned. But I don't know. Again, they need to communicate very well between one another. No,
I totally agree. Look, let me go back a couple of slides. Let's go back to Tierman. Right? Local guys, islanders, trained up to do ghost net removal. Why are we doing it? Why isn't DOF doing it? They're supposed to be managing the marine park. They're not doing it. Oh, because we don't have the resources, we don't have enough people. Engine rosak, minyak tada. I'm sorry, I've heard all of this before, right? So we're not holding them to account, right? That's one thing. Second thing is they don't know how to talk to villagers. We're the federal government. You small people on the islands, do as you're told. Seriously, I'm not kidding. That's the attitude that they have. I have had arguments with DOF people about how we don't have to be nice to the islanders. They have to follow the law. Seriously, right? They're saying they have to just follow the law, do as they're told. Yeah, but they're islanders. They don't think like that. I don't care. I'm from the government. Do as you're told. So there's that lack of communication. They're just not talking to each other. And so this is why these groups are so important and successful, because the locals want to be involved. I just wish the the federal government would listen a little bit more. I don't know how to make them listen. Oh, by the way, state governments are not that much better at listening. There's still a certain amount of arrogance there about small island people. It's an old phrase, old thinking, but it's still very, very relevant today. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any further questions you may have individually.